Here we go. Welcome into the Back to 12 podcast. I am RC Maxfield. We are live on YouTube and Twitter tonight after Texas Tech went through Big 12 Media Days. No, not at Jerry World. Feels like that's where it's been forever now. But out in Sin City, Las Vegas. It doesn't matter what Texas Tech puts it on in terms of red or black. Either way, it's good luck for them. Just saying. But we're going to discuss a ton that happened out in the desert today for your Texas Tech Red Raiders, including Joey McGuire taking the podium alongside of 5 Red Raiders on the team, including Baron Morton, Tahj Brooks with his little casino chip, and also go check out tajtime.com. Listen to Joey Mac. On that, we'll also discuss what Joey McGuire is excited about when it comes to this team and what is different from year number 1 to year number 3. But before we get into any of that, if you are watching on YouTube or Twitter, it does not matter. Like the video. If you're on Twitter, obviously give it a heart, retweet, and we'll go in there and we'll give some shout outs later on. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments as well, because we've had some people from Germany tuning in. We had some people from Jamaica, Canada, Japan. Let me know where y'all are watching from. I know a lot of y'all are going to say Texas, but hey, just let me know in the comments and leave your Q&As in there, as well as we will have a Q&A. I shouldn't say leave your Q&As in there. Just leave your Q's in there. I guess that's probably the better way to say it. But again, a lot to discuss, because for me, before we get into what Joey McGuire and Tahj Brooks, Jacob Rodriguez, Bryce Ramirez, Caleb Rogers, or Baron Morton had to say out in the desert, I kind of want to just talk about how it feels like college football is basically back. And I want to talk about it just from this standpoint, in the sense of media days for me feel like, okay, football's back. But even more so this year with next Wednesday, if you got the pre-order, College Football 25 coming out. It really feels like, okay, we're back in the swing of things. And I know that we're not officially back yet. Kickoff doesn't happen until August 31st. And I believe Texas Tech starts fall camp on August 4th. Don't hold me to that, but I know it's very close to that day. So there's a lot to discuss, and we're going to jump right into it. But before we do, let's get to the comment section, because we know that some people are in there from Twitter. We've got Morton Heisman season is officially on. We're going to talk about Baron Morton and some of his comments out there in Las Vegas. We'll answer Cody's question in terms of what the hell's going on with Baron Morton's shoulder. Well, we'll have his comments. Like I said, there's a couple of people trying not to drink the Kool-Aid. Drink all of it. Drink all of it. This is the time to consume Kool-Aid, people. Drink it up. Enjoy it. That's part of being a fan. I'm all for it. We've got people listening in Oklahoma, Tennessee. We've got Nashville. We've also got Elgin, a.k.a. the sausage capital of Texas. Who knew? You learn something new here on the Back to 12 podcast each and every time you listen. Even if you don't want to sometimes, you learn something. But let's jump into this, because Joey McGuire and crew were obviously out in Las Vegas, and there were a couple of things that really stood out to me. And let's start with 5-star wide receiver Micah Hudson, because we know he didn't go through spring practice. A lot really hasn't been out there in terms of, is he back in the swing of things? Like, what's going on there exactly? And Jacob Harris over on the Scarlet and Black Insider was told that it's kind of a half and half thing. Like, he's going through everything, but only getting about half the reps right now. But Joey McGuire was asked about him out in Las Vegas, and well, the injury update is he's going to be ready to go by August 31st. And I think that a lot of people figured that would be the case when it came to Micah Hudson, but hearing it from the head man himself in such an open setting is obviously good. There's another thing on the Micah Hudson hype train, if you will, that Joey McGuire said. He was asked, when will some of these freshmen make an impact? Most notably, Will Hammond, Micah Hudson. He obviously talked about Micah Hudson first, and he said week 1. Listen, I think everybody knows, 5-star Micah Hudson. Like, everybody knows the kind of player that Texas Tech landed in the class of 2024, right? But Joey McGuire went on to say that he's had multiple coaches reach out to him and say he is a generational player. a guy that is instant impact. He's been compared to the Chris Olaves, the Jackson Smith and Jigbas. They also Garrett Wilson, a lot of Ohio State guys. And if you pay attention to what's going on in the NFL right now, there's a lot of those guys making an impact early and often, most notably now, Marvin Harrison Jr. And by no means am I saying Micah Hudson is going to be that from the jump, but that tells you how athletically gifted he is and what Joey McGuire thinks about him in terms of making an impact week one as a true freshman is not common in the Power 4 level. It's just not. You see it, a lot in terms of the sense of maybe there's one guy on each roster, but you think about that from the totality of classes that Power 4 programs have, and it's like, okay, well, there's only one freshman making an impact, and typically the classes are 25 at each school. You only got about 45 true freshmen making impacts. Micah Hudson's going to be one of those guys, and I truly think that he is going to thrive alongside a guy like Josh Kelly. And Coach McGuire even said as much, that Josh Kelly, isn't getting talked about a ton, right? Like in the sense of, we talk about him here plenty on the Back to 12 podcast because I thought he was arguably the most impactful guy that the Red Raiders landed in the portal. But Josh Kelly is a guy, in my opinion, that is going to elevate each and every wide receiver and skill position player for the Red Raiders, and maybe most notably Micah Hudson. So again, the big news from Joey McGuire on the Micah Hudson front is the fact that he's going to be ready for week one as it stands right now, August 31st, in the Jones, the new South End Zone to be unveiled, and prime time, right? 6 p.m. kickoff out there. He's going to make an impact. And if you ask me right now, I think you're probably looking at your 3 starting wide receivers being Coy Aiken, Micah Hudson in the slot, Josh Kelly on the outside, with Jalen Conyers at the tight end position. You can mix and match any of those 3 tight ends. I really, truly think you have 3 impact tight ends on your roster now, and we know who's going to be the starting running back. And we'll talk about him here in a minute, because there was one number that people for Texas Tech just continuously said. Everybody that had a mic in front of their face that was associated with Texas Tech was saying one number. And we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But I know everybody wanted to hear about Micah Hudson. And shoot, I'm excited about him too, from the sheer standpoint of he's a game changer in really an area that Texas Tech desperately needed, right? You added a guy like Josh Kelly, Caleb Payday Douglas. Don't forget the payday, right? You have Coy Aiken returning. You get 2 tight ends in the portal in Conyers and Miller. You have Tharp returning, obviously Brooks. But from the standpoint of wide receivers, there really hasn't been a guy like Micah Hudson from the standpoint of his measurables, his skill set, how highly touted he is from a prospect standpoint ever in Texas Tech's program history. And again, we're not trying to get ahead of ourselves here in the standpoint of, he's going to come out there as a true freshman and be 1,000-yard receiver. No, but he's going to make an impact. Don't get it twisted on that front. If he's on the field, he's a guy that the defense has to pay attention to each and every snap, period, end of story. And to hear that he's going to be ready to go on August 31st and make an impact from Joey McGuire, I mean, what more could you ask for if you're a Texas Tech fan on that front? All right, if you haven't already, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, and if you're watching on Twitter, follow me if you haven't already. We'll be sure to give some shout-outs. We got about 140 people in here. Let's retweet it if you're on Twitter, like it on YouTube. Let's get as many Red Raiders as possible in here on a Tuesday night, which I appreciate y'all spending some of y'all's Tuesday night with me after, again, a busy day on the Texas Tech front in terms of a lot of news, a lot of quotes going on. And we're going to get to Baron Morton here in just a second. But again, like the video, retweet if you're on Twitter, favorite the video, whatever the hell they say on Twitter nowadays. I don't know. And you'll get a shout out. And again, let me know where you're watching from in the comments as well. We've got some people watching from Lubbock, obviously. Then we've got Dio. We've got him saying, guns up, Red Raiders. Absolutely, no doubt about that. All right. Let's jump into probably the biggest talking point for Texas Tech this offseason. And call me out in the comments if you want in terms of me being wrong here. But I think the biggest storyline by far has been the health of Baron Morton. I think that that's fair to say. We have this quote from Baron Morton, as you can see on the screen right now. This is from Adam Rittenberg. You can see his qualifications over there. Senior writer, college football at ESPN, ESPN Plus, also on radio host and everything like that. But here at Big 12 Media Days, Texas Tech quarterback Baron Morton told us he's 100% recovered from the throwing shoulder injury he battled last season. He saw several specialists in late spring and began a program throwing 75 balls 4 times a week. He can now throw whenever he wants. Now, there's a lot to unpack here in the sense that, well, is he? Right? Like, I get it from the standpoint of Texas Tech fans. Are we sure he's 100% healthy? Obviously, you have to take it at their word right now when it comes to Baron Morton. But you think about the spring and what happened with him, right? He got shut down midway through spring practice, went to go see multiple specialists, as Adam said in that tweet right there. I believe it was Don Williams of the Lubbock Avalanche Journal that had a sensational article about really what has gone on with Baron Morton this offseason in his shoulder. So be sure to go check that out. I can put it down in the comments below. But Baron went to multiple specialists, most notably a guy in Birmingham, Alabama. And then after that, we didn't hear him going to any other specialists, right? It was quiet. We didn't really hear anything. And then all of a sudden, you get that Twitter notification, you hear that tweet go off, and it's Baron Morton just dropping 2 highlights. Him throwing the football, both to Coy Aiken, both deep balls, right? And you're thinking to yourself, okay, this is his message that he's 100% back. And it's obviously good to hear that he was throwing 75 balls a day, 4 times a week, right? And now he can do whatever he pleases. Because let's face it, if Baron Morton is not as close to 100% as possible for Texas Tech in 2024, every dream and aspiration you had for the Red Raiders this year to win 9+ games, 10 games, 11, whatever, if you're drinking all the Kool-Aid, busting through that wall, just like the Family Guy reference, like, it's gone, right? Because, yeah, Cameron Brown, I like his skill set. I like what Will Hammond is as a true freshman. I think he's probably the future quarterback for Texas Tech whenever Baron Morton's time in the 806 is done, right, as the QB1. But Joey McGuire said it himself today. Like, Baron Morton has changed this offseason for the better in the sense of there's a relief knowing that he's QB1, right? There's no competition. He's the guy. He can see the change not only in mannerisms from Baron Morton, but how he's speaking in the locker room, the presence that he commands in the locker room. And there's something to be said for that in the sense of having it on the field, right? If QB1 is healthy and Texas Tech has not had a quarterback start every game all year, right? Like every game of the year for Texas Tech since Nick Shimonek. Think about that. The year after Patrick Mahomes left. Patrick Mahomes has gone on to win 3 Super Bowls, okay? Didn't play for a year in Kansas City. Has started the past 6, been gone for 7 years, and you've only had one quarterback start all of the games in terms of him being QB1 from the jump and playing the rest. You have to have Baron Morton healthy. And to see this is obviously a positive. You're going to want to see it in camp. You're going to want to see those videos. But at the same time, this is what you want to hear if you're a Texas Tech fan from the sheer standpoint. Again, we saw what Baron looked like last year. He was fighting through it. Reports came out that he did not throw a football during the week at all, leading up to any game after West Virginia. He only threw on game days, right? You can't progress that way, right? Your offensive line obviously wasn't as good last year. You hope that that gets better, and we'll talk about the offensive line here in a little bit. But for me, when I look at Baron Morton and everything, he's the guy that elevates Texas Tech, and you have to have him. So again, going to put the quote back on the screen for you to look at it one more time. I'll read over it. Here at Big 12 Media Days, Texas Tech QB Baron Morton told us he's 100% recovered from the throwing shoulder injury he battled last season. He saw several specialists in late spring and began a program throwing 75 balls 4 times a week. Now he can throw whenever he wants. Again, he is by far the biggest piece for Texas Tech to reach their goals that they have this coming up season. And don't get it twisted. Joey McGuire wasn't out there today saying, oh, hey, we're going to run the Big 12. Everything runs through Lubbock. Nah, that's not what he said this time. But don't get it twisted. Joey McGuire had the utmost confidence in his team, and you could see it from everybody out there. Caleb Rogers even tweeted out, hey, we're here in Las Vegas to talk our shit, right? He used the poop emoji. So I appreciate the PG-ness. Here on the channel, we don't do that. But Baron Morton, and having him healthy is pivotal for the Red Raiders in multiple ways. And again, a guy that you think is going to do great things for Texas Tech, highly touted quarterback, was the gem of all gyms when it came to the Matt Wells era. Remember, that's who recruited him. Obviously, he wanted to be a Red Raider, has that lineage in his blood, been a Red Raider since he was born, all the baby pictures and everything. But hearing that from him, hearing the throwing program that he's been on, and now going into this part of the summer, really where you're starting to ramp up, and now he's throwing to his teammates, because that was really one of the biggest worries for me was how much was he going to be able to throw before fall camp or even game number 1, right? Because you have so many new guys in that wide receiver room, most notably Micah, Josh, Caleb. Got to say payday there because, again, baller nickname. But when you look at everything, Baron Morton's a game changer. He's taken notice of people talking trash about him. And again, has he lived up to the hype so far? No, but he hasn't been healthy, right? A healthy Baron Morton changes the landscape for Texas Tech. And to hear this news this far out from fall camp is absolutely massive for Texas Tech. Not only for Texas Tech, but for the fans too, because it was a big question mark. And again, I understand you have to take what they're saying at face value. It's words. You want to see it on the field. I wholeheartedly understand that. But at the same time, I didn't know if he was going to be able to go through fall camp, right? Like they were saying he was, but to hear that he's actually throwing, to see some of the videos out there is huge for Texas Tech, because it's one of those deals where you have to think, okay, the offensive line is going to be better. At least in theory, I think it will be, and I'll tell you why here in a little bit. But I also think you look at the wide receiver group, much improved. You know what you have in Tahj Brooks. The tight ends will be used this year, people. I promise you. They have 3 tight ends that are getting NFL grades, according to Joey McGuire. The reason that they weren't used last year is because they had to use them on the offensive line as an extra blocker because the offensive line was so bad. One of the main reasons that you started 3 quarterbacks last year because you couldn't keep them upright. You had 28 sacks last year given up, okay, if you were Texas Tech. You got to keep Baron Morton upright. Caleb Rogers himself said that their goal is to have 10 or fewer sacks. Is that ambitious? Yeah, I think so. But you go out and you address the offensive line from the standpoint of not only in the portal, but maybe even more importantly, the coaching hire in the sense of Clay McGuire. Clay McGuire was the guy that Joey wanted to hire at first. It didn't come together. They had Hamby. Hamby got dismissed. They hire Clay McGuire away from Washington State. That's going to be the pivotal group to keep Baron Morton upright. But again, Baron Morton at 100% going into the season is massive for Texas Tech because there are a buku amount of playmakers on this offense. This is probably one of the most talented offenses in terms of skill position units from wide receiver, running back, tight end that Texas Tech maybe has ever had. Again, you're going to put the Crabtrees of the world and some of those Mike Leach receiving groups ahead of them, obviously. But they're in the conversation in terms of high up there on the list, okay? Because Josh Kelly is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the country. Micah Hudson, 5-star. Caleb Payday Douglas was a starting wide receiver at Florida, the number 2 wide receiver there. Then you got Coy Aiken coming back. You also have Dre McCray. You've got Jordan Brown healthy. Then you look at the tight ends. Giancarlos Miller led his division in football at Elon in terms of yards after the catch. You've got Jalen Conyers, a guy that has grown up with Baron Morton. You got Mason Tharp back and healthy. You've got Cameron Valdez coming back, who I expect to take a leap. You got Cam Dickey back there as a true freshman who could make an impact at the running back position. And then obviously Tahj Brooks. That's what's surrounding a potentially healthy Baron Morton. All right. That's huge. And if he is healthy, and you got to take it for what it is right now, go ahead, put that emoji, the rising chart emoji, because Texas Tech, they may have been picked 9th, and you can tell, say, RC, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, whatever. But if Baron Morton is healthy, 9th is far, far too low for the Red Raiders. All right, where are we watching from here? We got Texarkana. We've got Victoria, Texas. We've got Extra saying He said Clay McGuire is a great teacher. How much improved will the offensive line be? We'll get to that here in just a second. Coach Joey McGuire admitted that wide receiver is much better than last year. Yep, and Rodgers is the starting right guard. Yeah, we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit because there was a lot of interesting notes from Joey McGuire, and we're going to shift to defense here. But again, if you haven't already, be sure to like the video if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching over on Twitter, which I know quite a few of you are, be sure to retweet and then like the video as well. I'm going to go see if anybody has real quick. I'm going to call y'all out. I'm going to call you out on it, okay? Because there's only been 7 people that have liked it. What are we doing here, people? What are we doing here? I know more of y'all are watching. We've got John. We've got Soccer Dad. We've got Tino. We've got Donovan. Jack. We've got Colin. We've got Flash. And then we've got Cooper as well. So again, if you want to shout out here tonight on the live, well, be sure to like the video over on Twitter. And then I'll obviously give you a shout out here if y'all are watching on YouTube, as I greatly appreciate each and every one of y'all doing so. All right, let's talk about the defense real quick before we get back to the offense, because there was one main point I really wanted to discuss because I thought Joey McGuire really drove this point home multiple times, whether he was on the TV broadcast actually talking to the commentators, whether he was on stage, whether it was after in the more like around you media where they huddle and everything, the typical type stuff you think of. He kept bringing up the defensive line, and he kept bringing up the drastic difference between 2 groups on the teams from his year number 1 out in the 806 to year number 3. And one of them was on offense. The other one was on defense. On defense, he was talking about the defensive line. Here on the channel, we'll start our previews in terms of, well, position previews. Actually, this week, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. We're actually going to do the QB one on Thursday. Shh. That was a really bad attempt at a secret. That was stupid of me. Anyway, he talked about the defensive line a lot. And the defensive line, when he got there, he admitted he only had really 3 guys he wanted to play. And if you think back to year number 1, Jalen Hutchings and Tony Bradford played more snaps at the DT spots in the interior of the defensive line than any combo in college football that year. And really, it wasn't that close, okay? Because they didn't have depth. One of the main things that he addressed and his staff addressed was going to get defensive line in terms of waves. That's what you have to have on the defensive line, specifically in the interior. If you want those guys to go 100% of the time, you better have some talented guys behind them, at least that can come in and do certain things in terms of a skill set well for the time that your starters, quote unquote, are off the field. He said now they feel comfortable with 7 of the guys that they have on the interior offensive line. Drastically different. And again, would you like to have 12? Yes. But I'm telling you right now, if you paid attention to the transfer portal this year, there were 2 positions that were the most highly coveted in all of college football. First and foremost, quarterback, because duh. The second, defensive line. They don't make those in terms of guys that can come in and make an impact at the Power 4 level. Those guys don't hit the portal. And when they do, they get hefty bags. I don't even know if Hefty, the trash bag company, can provide a trash bag for the amount of money that is going to be put in one of their bags from other schools in terms of a defensive lineman going there, okay? But it's great to hear that. You think about some of the guys that Texas Tech has, and you got the Cofields of the world. You've got Ledette. You've got Hanson. You've got Carroll, right? 2 of those guys from the portal from Nevada and Rice. They're making jumps up, but they've seen flashes in terms of having good film against Power 4 competition. Now, do you expect them to come in and be Tony Bradford and Jalen Hutchings? Lord, I hope not. I hope not, because you're going to be severely disappointed. That said, I do think the wave aspect, as I previously mentioned, is huge for Texas Tech in the sense of now you can go in, give max effort for 2-3 snaps. Boom, 2 more guys in there, and you think that offensive line wants to play those guys over and over again when they're at 100%? I can guarantee you that is a hell no, okay? So that's something that really stood out in the sense of Joey was really emphatic about that point on the defensive line, talking about it on all 3 stages of the media progression out there in Las Vegas, on TV, in front of the media on stage, and then in front of the media where got the Texas Tech backdrop with Adidas and everybody with the microphones in his face and stuff, whatever. The other one was, well, what he talked about in the sense of the offense. And this was interesting because I want to make sure I pull this quote up correctly from Joey McGuire in this sense, because this was a really interesting talking point for him, as I'm going to put my own tweet up here. Talk about an egotistical, you know what. Anyway, Joey McGuire on the biggest difference for the Texas Tech offense from year 1 to year 3. Offensive skill. What does he mean by that? He mentioned the 3 tight ends with NFL grades. That would be Conyers, Tharp, and Miller, plus the wide receivers in Aiken, Kelly, Douglas, and Micah. There's plenty of length and speed for the Red Raiders in 2024. If you listen to this channel for really the last year at all, and you listen to what Lyle Leong Jr. had to say about the Texas Tech wide receiver group, and before we get into that, yes, Lyle will be back shortly, people. I promise. I've had multiple people ask me. He will be back soon. I promise you. He talked about how these wide receivers just could not separate. There was no speed. They lacked physicality. There was no shiftiness, and they really weren't very good when it came to contested catches outside of really Coy Aiken, right? He was really the only reliable guy, and that's why he was getting targeted double-digit times when it came to late in the season. You don't have that issue anymore. And I know a lot of people will say, well, Kitley actually used the tight end. What is he actually going to use those guys? Yes. Again, I mentioned a little earlier, the reason he did not use them was the sheer fact of you had to have an extra inline tight end blocker there because your offensive line was so bad. And now your offensive line and Joey McGuire and Caleb Rogers, who will be the starting right guard, according to Joey McGuire, he mentioned that a couple of times, were very, very high on Sterling Porcher at left tackle. That's the weak spot for Texas Tech. If Porcher can come in and do the things that they need at left tackle, he doesn't need to be a star. He just needs to make sure that they don't allow a floodgate over there on the blind side of Baron Morton. You're good. And Caleb Rogers gave him a ton of praise, right? A ton of praise, saying that he came into spring camp. He struggled a little bit, but he looked himself in the mirror, took some on the chin in terms of, some bad reps, and he addressed it this offseason, and he's going about it and reshaping his body and changing the way that he addresses certain drills, and they credit that to Clay McGuire. That hire could be absolutely huge for Texas Tech. But back to the skill aspect of it, I think that is obviously being talked about quite a bit from the Micah Hudson perspective and getting Tahj Brooks back. But again, you add 2 guys that were starting wide receivers at the Power 5 level last year, and Josh Kelly and Caleb Payday Douglas. Again, you have to say the Payday if you're here on the channel. Got to do it. It's a baller-ass nickname. Anyway, you also bring back Coy Aiken, okay? You think about it from that standpoint. Then you add Micah to the mix, the tight ends. You have 9, 10 playmakers where you're like, whoa, that guy could take it to the house damn near anytime he touches the ball, right? And I didn't even mention a guy like Dre McCray. I didn't even mention a guy like Jordan Brown or Cameron Valdez, who has shown home run ability when he gets out into open space, right? There's a lot there. And so obviously the offensive line has to hold up. But I thought it was really interesting how Joey McGuire brought that up, in the fact that it was like, okay, those are the 2 areas that really stand out in terms of the biggest difference from year number 1 to year number 3 in his tenure out in the 806. And that is, of course, the defensive line, as we just talked about, as well as the offensive skill and just the skill across the board. And I'm excited as hell to watch these wide receivers this year. I don't know about you guys. Obviously, Tahj is awesome, but it's a double-edged sword for defenses now. You think about it. Are you going to load the box against Tahj and have single-man coverage with 1 safety, with Coy, Conyers, Hudson, and Kelly on the field? No. What's that going to do? Well, it's going to open up running lanes for Tahj Brooks. It's a win-win for Texas Tech in that regard. It all comes down to the health of Baron Morton, as we mentioned earlier, but also the offensive line. And I think both of those things are definitely headed in the right direction. All right, let's get into some of the comments. We've got people watching from Baytown. We've got a question from Gloria. Will offensive coordinator Kitley dare to go out on the field and call a deep bomb on 1st and 10 in the opening drive? I mean, maybe. I think you're going to see a lot more vertical passing, though. There was a stat that they said today that I think it was 40% of all Texas Tech passes last year were within 5 or 7 yards of the line of scrimmage. And it makes a lot of sense, right? Your quarterback can't throw down the field, right? Like, I mean, he was hurt. Baron Morton was hurt. So it makes sense. Obviously, you wanted to see Kitley be a little bit more creative. But as this offseason has gone about and really started to get into the next year, and I went back and watched some games multiple times, but at least the game, one each time, right? You could see, okay, Barron was struggling, right? And so Kitley was limited somewhat in what he was doing. The offensive line limited it as well. I'm not giving Kitley a free pass by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think you're going to see a lot more creativity this year with skill position players that actually know how to separate. It's a crazy concept, but I think it's true. We've got Ryan from Baytown. John says Joey is big on Will Hammond. That kid is going to be special. Yeah, he said today, I believe, and I could be off 1 or 2 when it comes to it. Will Hammond had 25 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions in spring ball. That was against all 3 levels that he played against in terms of team 1, 2, 3, in terms of the stringers out there on the field. So, yeah, Will Hammond's going to be special. But he did reiterate Cameron Brown will be the backup quarterback and used in every game in some certain type of package. I would think like Donovan Smith, if we're being honest, near the goal line, use that body of his. He's 6'2", 6'3", somewhere in that range, and weighed in at 237 yesterday, Joey McGuire said. So you got to use that weapon. There's no doubt about it. We've got somebody watching from Odessa. We got Branson, Missouri, checking in late from Richardson, Texas. Thorndale in here as well. We've got Fort Worth, Aledo for Renee. Efren was watching from Odessa. We've got a question here from Ritter. RC, are you worried about the youth on the defense? No, actually, I'm kind of excited. I think that there could be some plays that are really frustrating. There's no doubt about it, but I'm really, really excited to see guys like Mo Horn on the outside. I'm really excited to see a guy like Chapman Lewis out in the secondary, where I think he probably starts at safety for you alongside CJ Baskerville. You got Brennan Jordan back there as well. A couple other guys in the secondary that are young as well, but those are the main ones that really stand out. On defense, you get Isaac Smith back, albeit from a big-time injury. Remember what he did in the bowl game against Mississippi State the year prior. So I'm excited about some of the youth on this team in the sense of there's a lot of it. I think that there's really, when you look at the defense, it's funny how things have changed. Like, it's literally the strength of your defense now, what was your weakness, at least perceived last year in terms of linebacker. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not worried about linebacker at all. I got Jacob Rodriguez and Ben Roberts. Got a couple of other guys in there like Dingle and a few other guys. Like, linebacker's great, in my opinion. I am interested to see the rotation of the defensive line and just how much that pass rush can get home on opposing quarterbacks. But in terms of the youth, no, I'm actually pretty excited about it, to be honest, because now we're starting to get to see Joey McGuire's recruiting classes, right? And these are the ones that were up there, right? Higher than Wells could even imagine during his time at Texas Tech. Now you're starting to see some of those. So that's huge, in my opinion. Fernando said Morton looked great. Can't wait to see how DC schemes against Texas Tech offense. If teams don't stack the line, Tahj will run crazy. When they stack the line, TCU's receivers will be breaking open, plus a dose of QB2. Yeah, I'm really interested to see kind of how many cards you see from Texas Tech early on before Big 12 play. You'll see a lot more against Washington State than you will against Abilene Christian or North Texas. But Texas Tech has a chance to do something really special early on. Really, really special. Like, if we're being honest about it, like, let's take the bias out. Worst case scenario, okay? Considering where you're playing these teams, worst case scenario through 5 games for Texas Tech should be 4-1. That's worst case scenario. Realistically, you're going to be favored in each and every game. Like, it'll be close up in Pullman against Washington State. Probably be, a 3.5-point game, 3, whatever. Really close spread in that one, just because, again, it's on the road. And really, Texas Tech has given Vegas no reason to think that they can win on the road. It's been a really big issue. And Joey McGuire talked about that. He also talked about how they've been slow starters and are 8-2 in November and December games. You have a chance to switch that this year, because you play Abilene Christian at home, right? You play Washington State, then you play UNT, then you play Cincinnati and Arizona State, the two teams that are going to be near or at the bottom of the Big 12 more than likely this year, alongside Houston, right? So you have those two. There is no reason whatsoever, if you're Texas Tech, that you should not be 4-1 when you at least 4-1 headed to Tucson for your first road game. You do not go on the road all but one time for really the first 5 weeks of the year. You got to make that happen, right? And again, I know you have a late kickoff against ACU. You have a late kickoff in Pullman. That'll be 9 p.m., excuse me. And then it's an 11 a.m. kickoff for UNT, which is fine. But then you play Cincinnati, Arizona State, more than likely day games, if we're being honest about it. There's no reason you shouldn't at least be 4-1. At least 4-1, in my opinion. My boy is live. Just came from the 365 stream. RC, you should do a quick segment with them one day on the phone. Yeah, no, they do great stuff over there. 365. Really good stuff when it comes to all things Big 12 and Texas in general. So I definitely enjoy those guys, especially when realignment's going on. They get some really good commentary from national analysts and everything like that. This was not a 365 promotion. They're not paying me to say this. I just enjoy their content. Let's see. RC, which game are you going to in Lubbock to see the new end zone? Would love to buy you. I think he's trying to say buy me a beer. I think right now, tentatively, let me tell you, y'all are watching. We got 350 people in here. I appreciate each and every one of you. Again, like the video if you're watching on YouTube, and be sure to retweet and favorite the video if you're watching on Twitter. This is my plan for football season. Y'all are getting an inside scoop here. We'll say a little bit more going forward. I will be live streaming every game this year for Texas Tech, except for one, and I will let you know what that is here in a second. What I mean by live stream, we'll have a live interactive scoreboard. The chat will be going. You can live commentate. I will answer your questions. I'll be giving you play-by-play, instant analysis of everything Texas Tech is doing on the gridiron for each and every game this season for Texas Tech. So that's just another reason to follow me on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. But the game that I am planning on going to out in the 806, as it stands right now, you didn't think I was going to miss Coach Prime coming out to the 806, did you? You didn't think I would miss that. No, sorry, Bob. That's the one. I think that's the one I plan on going out to on November 9th. Each and every other game I would be doing a live stream, probably start, I don't know, probably like 30 minutes before, do a pregame, get everybody in there. We'll be doing it both on Twitter and on YouTube, so be sure to watch on both of those. We'll be having a sponsor on there, might be having a couple of guests drop by as well. So you're going to want to be on the lookout for that. But that is kind of the plan for when Texas Tech starts rolling a little bit. In terms of football season, we'll be doing live streams here on the channel each and every Saturday for your Red Raiders on the largest Texas Tech YouTube channel, over 10,000 strong, right? And it keeps growing each and every day. Sincerely thankful for each and every one of y'all. And I think right now I'm at like 12,800 followers on Twitter, which is nuts to me. Very appreciative of everybody that tunes into the content, whether it's on Twitter, YouTube, and everything else that I do as well. This is from Joseph. Can we beat Prime? Do people think Colorado's good? Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the comments real quick if you think Colorado is good. Just a Y for yes or N for no. And by good, I mean, do you think that they could win 7+ games? Let me know in the comments, because I'll give you my interpretation of this. I think Colorado is one of the most top-heavy, talented rosters in terms of their top 5 players in the country. I think there is a severe lack of depth on that team. Could I be proven wrong? Hell yeah. I think it could happen. You got a great quarterback, obviously in Shadur. If you haven't seen Cam Ward calling him out on his bullshit, that was a great video. But you also got Travis Hunter. You've got really talented guys. I could argue with you, those are the 2 most talented players in the Big 12. I don't think anybody would get upset about that, because I think that that's probably close to a fact or a really good argument to have. That being said, They went 4-8 last year. They got better, sure, but they got exposed in the Pac-12. They went out and they addressed some things heavily in the portal, but me personally, I don't know if the portal and just going to the portal outside of maybe one high school guy here, one high school guy there is the way to do it. It's the great experiment for Dion. And I'm not saying that Texas Tech is leaps and bounds better, right? But at home, if Baron Morton's healthy and you don't have some catastrophic season, if you're Texas Tech, like when they come into Lubbock, the Red Raiders should be at least a touchdown favorite. At least a touchdown favorite. It's drastically changed now. I think that that's kind of where we're at. And I know that they were close in terms of the Big 12 standings, but that's just kind of how I feel about it right now. And maybe I'm off base there. I think Colorado has a ton of talented guys, but until they prove it really at, not only really the Pac-12, which RIP, but now the Big 12, like, I'll believe it when I see it type deal. And if they don't do it this year, I don't know when they're going to do it because you got to think about it. Shedeur is gone and Travis is gone after this year. So I don't know. It's really interesting from that standpoint. I'm really interested to see how many games they win. I think they're probably a borderline bowl team. I don't think that that's hot takey or anything. I just don't know if they have the depth when it comes down to it. Yeah, Steven, Tech couldn't beat Colorado when they were in the Big 12. That's drastically different. That was when Colorado was actually good at football. They're 2 years removed from losing, on average, every Pac-12 game and really every game on their schedule by 30 points damn near. Like, they did improve last year. There's no doubt about that. Probably improved a lot more than people thought, or at least realistically thought, just because, again, you're going from a team that had no business playing Power 5 football to winning 4 games. And albeit 4 doesn't seem like a lot. There was a lot of hype around Dion, but not a bad job, all things considered, when he had to overturn the roster. But yeah, absolutely. Texas Tech can beat Coach Prime. And I'm excited that I will be out in Lubbock, at least tentatively right now. I'm going to ask you one more time before we get into the final topic here for Texas Tech and Media Day. And it's a very fun one, in my opinion. To like the video. Let me go over to Twitter. Let me see how many more people have liked and everything like that. Who we got here? We've got Jacob. I ain't gonna lie. This is a really good Twitter name. Little Red Raiderhood. That's dope. And then you got Eli as well. Who else do we have on here? We've got Ritter. We've also got, So again, if you want a shout out, again, I know that there's 330 of y'all watching over on Twitter. Just simply, hey, let me know down in the comments, man. Let me know, like the video, and do the same over on YouTube as well. All right. Last thing I wanted to talk about is this. Tahj Brooks, arguably the best running back in college football. Arguably, again, the whole Ollie Gordon thing is interesting that they're not going to play or suspend him, but I digress. Tahj Brooks is on the precipice of Texas Tech football history. And if you didn't know that before today, if you listen to anything Big 12 Media Day related to your Red Raiders, I promise you knew about it. They put him on the Sphere out there in Vegas in terms of a graphic. They even had a poker chip that had on one side Tahj Brooks' face and then a QR code on the other that led you to tajtime.com. By the way, check it out. It's actually a pretty cool website for him. Why was he discussed so much? Obviously, he could break the all-time leading rushing mark in program history this season. The number that I heard more than any other number today, mentioned by Joey McGuire, Caleb Rogers, Baron Morton, Tahj Brooks, Jacob Rodriguez, Bryce Ramirez, anyone affiliated with Texas Tech football, was 1168. That's how many rushing yards he is away from being the all-time rushing leader in Texas Tech program history. How big of a deal is it? Caleb Rogers had an interview this morning with David Collier out there for 100.7 The Score in Vegas, and he repeatedly mentioned it. I mean, repeatedly mentioned it in the sense of, and it's not going to take 13 games either, was a quote from him, in the sense of getting Tahj to that mark. They mentioned how Tahj is a guy that they've never seen a guy work as hard as him. And 1168 just felt like every other sentence was related to Tahj Brooks, and rightfully so. You think about last year and the struggles that Texas Tech had offensively and the passing game, and Tahj was still simply amazing. He was second in the country in terms of carries last year with 290s, fourth in the NCAA in rushing yards, only behind Ollie Gordon, a guy from Troy, and then one other person, and it was pretty damn close. Tahj Brooks was the focal point. He's going to be the focal point of the offense this year. But again, you kept hearing 1168. And the reason I keep bringing this up, or I wanted to bring this up, I should say, is the fact that you can tell that this team is bought into the brand. And again, that can be something that not a lot of people take seriously. But I think in football, and maybe that's the biggest sport that you can buy into as an overall team, it's the most important in the sense that people love Tahj in that locker room. That locker room just loves each other. And Joey McGuire said it best in that regard. They want to get Tahj on the facade of Jones AT&T Stadium. Caleb Rogers says that's a conversation that the offensive linemen have. Like, his name could be on a stadium one day. They think about that. They want to be able to tell their grandkids that they played with arguably the greatest running back in Texas Tech program history. And if he gets that 1168, which I don't see why he wouldn't, if the offensive line takes a step forward, you have a healthy Baron Morton, and the offense opens up a little bit in terms of stacked boxes for the Red Raiders, he has a real chance at it. But that's another reason why I get so excited about this football team. And I catch myself in terms of, that gif where you're like pointing at yourself in the mirror and you're saying, don't do this. That's me sometimes when I'm talking to myself, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Because again, I try to give rational takes here on the channel. I try to be as unbiased as possible. But listen, when it comes down to it, I'm a Texas Tech alumni. You could see it right there. Okay. I'm a fan just like each and every one of you. I love this program, and to hear them talk about a guy like this that we've seen developed and stayed at Texas Tech after a coaching change, really put in the work and have a chance to really go down in the history books after everything that went on during his time at Texas Tech, really speaks volumes to the program that Joey McGuire and crew have really not even built, but continued to build upon, right? That foundation. It doesn't happen overnight. And again, I probably could be a video advertisement for them right now, but it really was telling to me how as soon as Tahj was mentioned, you could see everybody's faces light up, right? Whether it was Joey McGuire, Caleb Rogers, whether it was Baron Morton, Jacob Rodriguez, Bryce Ramirez, every time the person they were talking to or being interviewed by said Tahj, their faces lit up, right? And they couldn't help but mention 1168, 1168. Caleb Rogers the most. And obviously, he's the starting right guard for the Red Raiders. So for me, it's something that stands out, and it's a major storyline because, again, we're talking about a guy that is Texas Tech, right? He is the brand. He is. When we look back at the success that Joey McGuire inevitably will have at Texas Tech, in my opinion, I mean, Tahj Brooks is going to be a major reason why, right? Like, he's going to be a major reason why. In 1168 and hearing that number over and over and over again was just something to continuously think about, in the sense of this team isn't looking at it as a pressure aspect of it. No, they're looking at it as, we're going to make this happen, because if anybody deserves it, it's Tahj. And I think that tells you what this team views as their goals, not only from an individual standpoint, but from a team standpoint. Because I'm telling you right now, if Baron Morton is healthy and Tahj Brooks gets 1,168 yards, to the moon emoji. I hope you bought Dogecoin, people, because they ain't finishing ninth, okay? I'm telling you that right now. So that was something that really stood out, and why I put it in the title of the video, Tahj in 1168. I don't know about you, but it's going to be one of the most fun storylines to watch all year long, and something that really stood out to me out in Vegas. All right. I think I'm going to wrap it up there, unless y'all have some questions for me. Let me get to the comment section. Let's see. Is Micah going over or under 100 yards week one? I would probably take under. Yeah, I'd probably take under. But it just does take one big play for him to break that. RC, is Micah Hudson a starter? Or is he like the first off the bench player? I know he's a freshman and freak, but he's still a freshman. Could he come in and play every game as a change of pace wide receiver? I think he starts. I think he's your starting slot wide receiver. I think if you ask me today, you're starting skill guys on offense. Obviously, Brooks in the backfield, Josh Kelly, Coy Aiken as your two outside wide receivers, Jalen Conyers as your starting tight end, and then Micah Hudson as your starting slot receiver. Now, that may not happen from the Micah standpoint just for the sheer fact of maybe they want to ease him back into game action after recovering from a knee, aspect this past offseason. But I do think that he is going to be the starter, in my opinion. Let's see. From LFG, yell it out loud if you know what it is. Like number 31, appreciate you, sure. Let's see. I'm ready for a new Be the Brand TT shirt. Joey McGuire is a positive coach for our school. Absolutely. Renee says, I have 8 and 4, so probably anywhere from 2nd to 9th in the league. Yeah, I think, truthfully, if Baron Morton plays 10-plus games, 8 wins should be the minimum. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on as the season gets closer, but that's kind of my opinion. Let's see. Outsider here. I picked Tech number 7. Love Conyers. In my opinion, 2024 Tech will sweep the Arizona schools. That is spicy considering the Red Raiders have to go out to Tucson. But it's not impossible. They got a new coach out there, and Coach Brennan coming in from San Jose State. But I think the Red Raiders, if Baron Morton stays healthy, and that's a big if. And again, today, 100%. That's what he mentioned. Hey, I really, truly believe, 8 is probably the floor with how easy the schedule is for the Red Raiders. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. One more time, if you haven't already, be sure to like the video on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button to stay in the know on all things Texas Tech, men's basketball and football all year long, whether it's recruiting on the gridiron, hardwood. We've got you covered right here on, the most subscribed to Texas Tech YouTube channel and the Back to 12 podcast channel.